Hello guys, today I'm going to show you how you can integrate Redux with Next.js, older versions of Next.js, or a Next.js project that doesn't use the new app router. So let's get into it. So here we have a basic application. We have a login page, and we also have a dashboard home page, which is supposed to be a protected route. So this is at the end of this tutorial, we're going to implement this dashboard home page as a protected route, which we won't be having access to it um without being logged in. So currently I'm using a Node.js backend for the authentication and authorization for the to get the token. So probably in one of my future videos I'll show you how you can make how you can develop uh, such a backend. But today our focus is on the front end, the Next.js. So if we go to our project, so this is the project. I'll create a link to the repo in the description of this video. So we have a basic Next.js application here. And we also have the login page and the dashboard page, like I mentioned. And I just did some styling to the login page here and the dashboard page. Just some basic styling, nothing special. So the first thing we want to do is we want to install our Redux. So, and to do that, we need to run npm install at redux.js/toolkit and also React Redux. So while we wait for that to install, we need to create a folder in the root called Redux, which we house our Redux implementation. We also need a utility folder where we will implement our token service. So we'll be storing our token in the cookie rather than local storage. And to do that, I want to initialize the helper function, which I will call it token service.js. And this contains just helper methods that helps us to set the token in the cookie. You can see here we have the update cookie function. So what we are doing here is this accepts the token, and then we get the expiry date. We decode the token with JWT decode. We also need to install that JWT decode, and so I'm going to install those package now. JWT dash decode and JS cookie. So basically these are just helper functions. This is to get the token from the cookie. You can see here. This is to get the user. We first of all get the access token, and then we decode it. Also, to get the access token, we have a function for that. So this is basically helper functions. This is for invalidating the user, removing the access token from our cookie, get the expiry date, and get if the access token is expired or not. So these are just helper functions that we'll be making use of. So in this app, I'm just going to walk you through how you can implement Redux. If you want a detailed uh, explanation of how Redux Toolkit work, maybe you can check my previous tutorial on Next.js 13 implementation of Redux Toolkit. So this is just an additional videos for those who are not using the app router. So the first thing we want to do is to create our API slice. So we need the API folder here, and then inside the API folder we create our API slice. So but I also want to mention that here we need to have a .env. So I'm going to create a .env file. You can name it .env or .env.local, anyone. So I'm just going to paste it's just simple environment variables. This is the link to the backend. And if you have a production link also, you can add it here. Production link to your backend if your backend is hosted live. And then we have the node environment we are currently on development. So that's just basic. And then going on with the Redux, we create our API slice.js. So I'm going to paste the code and explain what that does. So basically what we are doing here is we are importing the link and also importing this from our auth slice, which we are yet to create. We'll create that in a minute immediately after this. So also we are getting the API link from our environment variables. So if you're on production, it gets the production link. If you're on dev, you get the development link. So and then we create our base query here, attaching the API link, and we prepare the header, get the token, attach it to the headers here. So here is base query with reauth. So what happens is this function is called whenever our token expires, and we need to revalidate the token. We need to request for another token. So depending on how your backend is structured. So what we are doing here is, if we are getting a 403 error, that is telling us that the token has probably expired. So we call the refresh backend endpoint to refresh the token. And once we get the token, we dispatch it back to set credentials. So I'm going to create these set credentials in just a minute. And then, so if we don't get a response, we log the user out of the application. So I'm also going to create this now. So to create the feature, the auth slice, we go to our roots, to our Redux folder, create a new folder called features. Inside features, we need another folder called auth. And then inside the auth, we need our auth slice.js. So for our auth slice, I'm also going to paste the code and explain what it does. So if you have noticed, we are using use client because Redux is a client side. It runs on the client side, so we have to use client since Next.js is a server first apply library. So what we're doing here is we're creating our auth slice. We name the slice auth and set our initial state. So here we are getting the token, we are getting the user from the token directly, because this is to prevent the issue that we have with Redux losing the state once you refresh a page. So uh, this will prevent it from losing state, since our token is already stored, our user is stored in the cookie. So we fetch it directly from the cookie, also the token, and then the reducer here, the set credential reducer that we called in the API slice here, that we use to dispatch the new uh, token that we got. So here we're just destructuring response from payload and then decoding the token, the access token that is gotten from the response. We decode it and set it as the user, state.user, and set the token, the access token, also as state.token, and then we update the token, the user in the cookie, and also the logout sets the state to null and removes the user from the cookie. So that's just simply implementation, and then we export our reducers here, and our auth default auth slice reducer, we export it, and then these are just power functions for selecting current user. We return the state.auth.user if it exists, else no, and also select current token also. So that's just a simple implementation for that. Then the next thing we want to do is to create our auth API slice, which we will use to access our API to login API slice.js. So we are going to, which we are going to use to access our login and the create user endpoint. So also I'm using use client here. Like I said, Redux is a client side apply. It runs on the client side, sorry. So you can see here. So also we fetch the base query and the API slice. We also get the base endpoints, and then we create our auth API slice by injecting the endpoints. Base query is gotten from this fetch base query here. We set the endpoint, and then we start creating our endpoint. We set the base URL, sorry, here, and then start creating our endpoint. So we have a login endpoint here, which receives a query with the credentials, and then we'll pass in the URL, the method, and the body, which is also the credentials we pass in. Also, this is for creating, it's the same thing that is being done here. It's for creating a new user, and then we export our logins slice and our use create user mutation, use login mutation. Note this name is gotten from the name of the endpoint here and here, like you see here, but it's camel cased, and then we proceed with use, and then after that we also add mutation. You have to follow this format as mentioned in the toolkit documentation. So this is basically our auth API slice. So now our slice is ready. The next thing we want to do is create our store. So in our Redux root, we create a store.js where we import our reducers. So basically, we create our store with configure store and set our reducers with api.reducer path, set it to api slice.reducer. and then the auth reducer, we set it to the auth reducer, which we import from auth slice here. Set the middleware also, and then DevTools is enabled only if we are on development. So we are checking the environment variable. If we are not in production, DevTools will be true. If we are on production, it will be false. So that's just the basics of that. Then we need one more thing. We need the provider. So unlike React, where we import our provider in the root of the application, we need to create our provider separately. Because it has to be a client component also. You can see here, use client, and then I imported the store. And then the provider from React Redux, I wrapped it around the children, which is the prop that is going to be passed. I'm passing the store here. So now we finished implementing Redux Toolkit, but we've not yet added it to our application. If we run the server now, let me run the server. You notice we still have the same thing that we, like when we started, we still have the same thing, and we can still access the dashboard home. So the next thing we want to do is we want to now use this provider. So how do we use that? We come into this our app uh, underscore app, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the provider around it. So I'm going to bring in the provider. It should be Redux provider. And then pass in the components and page props. So I'm going to save this. So we have an error. Let's fix this error. And it's coming from the auth slice. So our token service is not being imported correctly. I'm going to re-import it. There is another error, I'm not sure. Get state. So I think it's coming from the API slice. I'm gonna re-import this. And I'm gonna refresh this page. Get states. Cannot read property of undefined. Reading get state. Okay, let's see where the error is coming from. Okay, so what I'm going to do is add this to it. I think there is a problem somewhere. So I'm going to restart this just to make sure. Good. So now our application is still running. You can see we can still access the uh, protected, the route that is supposed to be protected, and our login page is still running. But I think our store is now ready. If you check our console, so now what we're going to do is um, now that we've wrapped the Redux provider around our application, we need to set the protected route, to define the protected route, and we shouldn't be able to access the dashboard page when we are not logged in. So that's what we're going to do next. Let me see, we are still currently logged in because we have the access and fetch token. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to refresh this page, go back to the dashboard, and we are still able to access it. So once we are not logged in, we should not be able to access this. So how do we do that? It's very simple. We need to create a authentication wrapper. So what I like to do is create a wrapper, call it a auth wrapper, auth wrapper.js. And inside the auth wrapper is a simple implementation of protected routes. So what we're doing here is we're defining our routes here. I'm going to comment this out for now so that you can understand what is going on. So we have a protected route here, and once we are not, so what I did here is simple. I'm creating a user with a state here, setting it to null default, and then getting the current user from our select current user from auth slice helper using the use selector hook, and then also we're getting the path name, that is the current path we are on, and we bring in the router also. So if there is no user here, if there is no user, which means the user is not logged in, and the path we are trying to access, the route we are trying to access is a protected route, it's going to push us to the login page. We're not going to be able to access the page. So this is just to check once the current user is available, it sets the state to the current user. So I'm going to save this now, go back to the front end. So if we reload this now, okay, we've just declared this authentication wrapper. Now the next thing we need to do is bring it inside our underscore app page. So we need to pass it immediately after the Redux provider, not before, because it needs to have access to Redux first. Our application needs to have access to Redux first before the protected routes. So now we bring in the auth wrapper. Auth wrapper. So once we have that, you can see it pushed us to the login page. Let me try to access the page back. I can't access it, but if I try from here, dashboard home, you can see that I can see the page briefly before it pushed me out. We don't want that to happen. So what is happening is that it is while it is still validating, it's already showing the children here, rendering the page here while it is still iterating and still validating or still running this. So we want to prevent this, and the way we can do that is by creating a loading component and display it while the user is not yet validated, rather than displaying the page itself. So we're gonna come. I'm gonna create a component folder, components, and inside this component I'm going to create a loading, call it a loading.js, and then just a simple React functional component with loading text. Save that, and then in our auth wrapper we want to import it, so which I imported here, but I'm gonna re-import it just to make sure that I'm going to uncomment this line here and import the loading component. So now that I've imported it, I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna restart the server just to make sure. Then I'm gonna refresh the page here. So we can see current user is null. It's null here. So if I try to access the dashboard home, you can see I'm no longer seeing the dashboard. If you look at this corner, you see the loading. The component is the loading component that got displayed loading briefly. So we do not have access to the page. While it is hydrating, it is the loading component it is displaying. And once we finish hydrating, it pushes us out before we can even access any other thing. Pushes us out to the login page. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to log in. And you're going to see that once we log in, we're going to have access to the protected route. So I'm going to log in. Okay, I haven't implemented the login page. So I'm going to go here to the login page, and I'm just going to paste the full implementation. So basically what we have here is we have a login function which is calling the login function in our use login mutation here, and then once we have a response, we dispatch to set credentials, and if that is successful, we should have a toast notification. So this toast we have is not yet installed, so I'm going to install the toast. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to npm install React Toastify. So once that is installed, React Toastify is installed, we need to bring it in inside our underscore. You don't need to do this, but just for reference sake, if you feel you want to do it, fine. If you don't want to, that's also fine. So I'm just going to bring in the toast container. If you want to learn more about this toast notification, you can check my tutorials. One of my tutorials, I created a tutorial on this. So I'm going to import it here, the toast container, and import the styles also and save it. So back to our login. Yeah, so once this is successful, we get a notification and then it pushes us to dashboard home. Else we log the error. So I hope we don't have the error here, because I'm thinking instead of us while importing the set credentials, we might have an issue with that. So I'm just going to re-import set credentials and use, I'm not sure if the location there is correct. Set credentials, re-import it. Okay, so now I'm going to go here and I'm going to try to log in. So I should get the user. Yeah, you can see successfully logged in, and it pushed us to the dashboard route. So now we have access to the protected route. So you can refresh and we'll still have access. See, we still have access to the route. We still have access to it. So, but once we delete let's imagine that our token got expired. So I'm just going to delete it from the cookie. And once I refresh it, it's going to log me out. You can see it log me out and push me back to the login page. I can no longer access until I am logged in. So let me log in again. I get a notification and I'm granted access to the page. So if you have other pages that you need to add to as a private route, you can add them here in your protected routes. You can just add the route like we have here, dashboard home / dashboard users. If you have any other route, maybe dashboard / settings, you can add them here and they will all be protected routes. You won't be able to access them without logging in. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial. Thank you and have a wonderful day. So the finished project is also going to be in my repo, and you can clone it from there.